Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea's current account surplus extended for the 9th consecutive month in January, mainly thanks to strong exports of semiconductors and vehicles. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo warns that he would not sit Italy by on those blacklisting or using any form of violence against junior doctors who return to work. He also vowed to resolve exploitative labor practices on trainee doctors. From publicizing and improving the human rights situation of North Korea to supporting North Korean defectors, South Korea's Unification Ministry announced 3 major tasks for this year. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with South Korea's latest trade data. The country's current account in January was in the black for the 9th month in a row, mainly driven by solid exports of semiconductors and cars. Our economics correspondent An Sung-jin leads us off. South Korea's current account balance for January saw a surplus for the 9th consecutive month. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday indicated that January's current account saw a surplus of $3.05 billion on the back of strong exports. This is largely attributed to the goods account, which was boosted by a more than 50% jump in semiconductor exports. A recovery in demand for high-performance memory chips and an increase of exports to China led the rise. Automobiles and machinery also performed well, pulling up exports.
Normally in January, the trade balance tends to shrink significantly compared to December as annual export performance records close, but the trend of improving monthly exports still prevails.
Shipments to the U.S., Southeast Asia, and China were all up compared to the year before. Meanwhile, imports fell by nearly 8% as prices for raw materials and capital goods dropped. The services account, which tracks the inflow and outflow of business services, tourism, and transportation, registered a $2.66 billion deficit as the number of outbound travelers increased. The official noted that the positive trend will continue throughout the year.
In the first half of the year, the goods account surplus will continue, and in the second half of the year, the rate of increase of the on-year surplus will become even greater.
An Sung-jin, Arirang News. Moving our focus to the tug-of-war between the government and the doctors protesting to the medical school quota expansion. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo warns that he would not sit Italy by on those blacklisting or using any form of violence against junior doctors who've returned to work. He also vowed to resolve exploitative labor practices on trainee doctors. Our Park Gun-woo reports.
Additional governmental measures against the ongoing walkout of trainee doctors in South Korea were announced on Friday following a meeting of the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters in Seoul. To lure more doctors back to their wards, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said the government will provide 1 million won, or roughly $750 per month, to trainee doctors in crucial medical sectors, including pediatrics. He also said the current harsh working environment of long hours needs to change and that the government will come up with ways to fix the problem. Now into week 3 of the mass walkout with over 90% of trainee doctors still not back at work and causing healthcare disruption, Prime Minister Han urged for them to return.
I ask for trainee doctors to return to their workplaces immediately. Patients are desperately waiting for every one of you to make this brave decision.
But he also criticized those who have revealed personal information of colleagues who have returned and bullied them in group chat rooms, calling this, quote, unacceptable. He also asked for the Health Ministry and National Police Agency to launch an investigation. Hospitals across the country are having to reduce the number of surgeries they carry out and limit their scope of emergency care. With that, guidelines were given to nurses on Friday that will allow them to provide more medical treatments, including CPR, as well as administer medicine to patients in emergencies. Still, some have raised concerns about whether nurses will be able to carry out their extra duties adequately and that there will be more time needed to apply the guidelines. Park Kwon, Arirang News.
South Korea's Unification Ministry has unveiled this year's major tasks, coming at a time when stakes are high on the peninsula. Those include publicizing the reality of North Korean residents while providing further assistance to North Korean defectors. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
A reunification that guarantees freedom and prosperity for residents in both South and North Korea. On Friday, Minister Kim Yong-ho, after speaking with President Yoon Suk-yeol the day before, announced 3 major tasks for his ministry in 2024. What's different this year, and the first major task announced, was the ministry's statement about letting the world know the reality of North Korea.
Reunification can only be achieved by acknowledging and publicizing the reality of North Korea. The ministry will do its best to let people know the seriousness of the North's human rights issues.
As a means of doing this, the ministry last month released a shocking report on North Korea's economy and society based on the testimony of more than 6,000 North Korean defectors over many years. The information had been kept confidential for more than a decade and contained graphic accounts of the economic and life suffering of North Korean people. The South Korean Unification Ministry until now focused on commentary of the history of the two Koreas when they weren't divided. But decades have passed, and with Pyongyang continuing to develop its nuclear and missile capabilities, calling the South its main enemy, the ministry is taking a different approach based on the president's orders.
The president said that the reunification we seek is based on the universal value of freedom, and that we should aim for a reunification that extends freedom to each and every one of the North Korean people.
The ministry's second major task involves efforts to improve the human rights situation in the North and bringing change for its people. Last but not least, the ministry plans to give more assistance to North Korean defectors so they can become part of the mainstream in South Korean society. The plans include giving financial assistance to those entering law school and helping those with medical licenses practice medicine here. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
In the U.S., President Joe Biden addressed the nation in his State of the Union speech, where he expressed confidence that Washington was not falling behind China by partnering with other countries, including South Korea. As he seeks another term in the White House, he also took several jabs at his rival, Donald Trump. Our foreign affairs correspondent, Bae Eun-ji, has the details.
President Biden claimed the U.S. was in a stronger position to win any conflict with China, while also adding that he wants competition with China, not conflict. In his State of the Union speech on Thursday local time, Biden said he's been working with countries including South Korea to stand up against Beijing.
We're standing up for peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. I've revitalized our partnership and alliance in the Pacific. India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Pacific Islands. I've made sure that the most advanced American technologies can't be used in China, not allowing to trade them there.
As Biden seeks to distinguish himself from former President Donald Trump ahead of the election in November, he made several jabs at Trump. Without calling him by name, he mentioned his predecessor 13 times in his hour-long speech on issues ranging from democracy to the war in Ukraine.
Now my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." I think it's outrageous, it's dangerous, and it's unacceptable.
As for the conflict in the Middle East, Biden pledged to increase U.S. humanitarian aid to Gaza. Specifically, he ordered the American military to build a temporary port on Gaza's Mediterranean coast to receive large shipments of food, water, and medicine every day, as well as provide temporary shelters. But he made it clear that there are no plans to put U.S. boots on the ground. Biden, who is 81 and the oldest president in U.S. history, also addressed concerns about his age as he seeks his second term in the White House.
My fellow Americans, the issue facing our nation isn't how old we are, it's how old are our ideas.
Biden also laid out plans to reshape the tax system, calling for an increase in corporate minimum tax to at least 21%. In addition, he reiterated his call for a tax on billionaires, a 25% minimum tax on unrealized income for households with a net worth of over $100 million, saying that would raise $500 billion over the next 10 years. Peun's Arirang News.
U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell once again hinted that potential interest rate cuts are on their way. This has led to the S&P 500 reaching a new high on Thursday. Our financial correspondent Moon Hae-ryun tells us more.
Central banks of major economies are gaining confidence that rate cuts are not far off as inflation shows signs of slowing. The European Central Bank held its interest rate steady following a fourth meeting, as policymakers hinted at a cut in interest rates this June. The interest rate has been kept at 4.5% as the central bank for the 20 Eurozone countries also revised its inflation forecast on Thursday. The latest projection puts inflation at 2.3% this year, down from the 2.7% forecast in December, as energy prices are expected to stabilize alongside lower consumer prices. This comes as Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell once again signaled the possibility of interest rate cuts within 2024, noting that the Fed is not far from the confidence needed to ease rates. Speaking at the Senate Banking Committee on Thursday, Powell outlined that the Federal Reserve is poised to gradually lift its restrictive policies once it is assured that inflation is steadily declining towards its 2% target. He underscored that this confidence is within reach. Powell's remarks came only a day after his testimony before Congress, where he presented a similar outlook on rate reductions. However, in his latest statements, he hinted more strongly that the moment to act on such confidence is nearing. Experts say that while core inflation is showing signs of slowing, some concerns need to be addressed before rate cuts can be undertaken.
Because of highly volatile price of food, the headline inflation perhaps is not coming down as quickly as the central banks want. So they're going to hold off on lowering the rates until they can see a definite trend on headline inflation. And that's probably going to be at the second half of the year.
This optimism was mirrored in the stock market's performance, with the S&P 500 achieving a new record high at Thursday's close on the New York Stock Exchange. Looking ahead, the Federal Open Market Committee is scheduled to meet on March 19 and 20, when a detailed policy statement and an update on the interest rate outlook are expected. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
A high court in Montenegro has overturned an earlier ruling that said disgraced crypto entrepreneur Kwon, or Kwon Do-hyung, should be extradited to the U.S. Instead, he's likely to be heading home to South Korea to face fraud charges. Jung Eun-ju has the latest.
Last month, the Puerto Rico High Court in Montenegro ruled that disgraced crypto entrepreneur and co-founder of Terraform Labs, Kwon, should be extradited to the United States to face fraud charges. However, Kwon's appeal was accepted on Tuesday, which invalidated the U.S. extradition and ordered a retrial. Montenegrin daily newspaper VST on Thursday local time reported that the same court which issued the extradition order had reversed its decision and ruled that Kwon should instead be extradited to South Korea. The latest ruling is said to be based on request letters received from both the U.S. and South Korea. The reversal is a major victory for Kwon, who wanted to be extradited to his home country. An extradition to the U.S. would have meant a much longer prison sentence. Kwon's attorney, speaking to online cryptocurrency media outlet CoinDesk, said their client will finish serving his sentence on March 23rd and will be extradited after that. According to a Bloomberg report on Thursday, the U.S. Justice Department said in a statement that it will appeal the ruling of the Montenegro court and continue to seek Kwon's extradition in accordance with relevant international and bilateral agreements and Montenegrin law. South Korea's Justice Minister Park Sung-jae said Friday that there has been no contact from Montenegro to extradite Kwon Do-hyung, referring to Kwon by his full Korean name, and that the ministry would take the necessary measures swiftly once they received an official notice. The eyes of global authorities, including Interpol, have been on Kwon ever since Terra collapsed in mid-2022. Billions of dollars of investor funds were wiped out, and Kwon fled South Korea and was arrested in Montenegro for possession of falsified official documents. 정은주, Arirang News.
South Korea's Fair Trade Commission is looking into social media platform Meta for failing to protect its users. Industry insiders said on Friday that the antitrust watchdog has sent an examination report equivalent to an indictment at the end of last year to Meta for its alleged violations of the country's e-commerce act. Reportedly, Meta, which operates Facebook and Instagram, has allegedly neglected to protect its users from counterfeit goods or fraud on social media marketplaces. The e-commerce law dictates that such platform operators should provide details on sellers to consumers to properly deal with disputes or complaints. South Korean girl group NewJeans became the first K-pop act to win the 2024 Billboard Women in Music Awards Group of the Year on Wednesday local time. This was the first time in 9 years for the award to be presented, with U.S. girl group Fifth Harmony having received the honor in 2015. When presenting the award, American country music singer Lainey Wilson pointed out that NewJeans was leading the new wave of girl groups in K-pop, a genre that has long been dominated by boy bands. The award was first presented in 2007 as part of efforts to recognize female artists and producers who had greatly influenced the music industry that year. Recently, Coca-Cola released its newest limited edition drink called K-Wave. It's available in 36 countries and already making a splash, with pre-order reservations doubling those of the brand's previous limited editions. But what's also interesting is that this new flavor shows a growing trend in food and beverage industry where culture meets consumption. Our culture correspondent Song Yujin reports.
Ever tasted Hallyu, or the Korean wave? Well, now you can, thanks to Coca-Cola's latest limited edition drink, the Coca-Cola Zero Sugar K-Wave. Drawing inspiration from K-pop, the company says its flavor will help consumers relive what it calls the excitement they felt when they first became a K-pop fan.
I can feel that big companies are definitely paying a lot of attention to the Korean market and the K-pop scene and how much their influence has risen.
What also stands out is the brand's logo in Korean at the center of the can. For the first time in its century-long history, Coca-Cola has incorporated another language into its logo. Why is this?
The growing global fascination with Korean content and artists has reshaped how we see the Korean writing system, turning it into a sought-after design element. In the past, using Korean was a challenge for global brands due to its uniqueness. However, as Korean became more familiar, the language now strikes a perfect balance between distinctive charm and universal appeal.
And Coca-Cola is not the only one to incorporate Korean in its logos and packaging. This Korean food company previously had an English-only logo, but introduced Korean into its branding this year. Another trend observed in the K-Wave Coke is the rise of K-pop stars as models for food and beverage brands. Coca-Cola's K-Wave's launch campaign featured groups Stray Kids, ITZY, and NMIX. McDonald's recently collaborated with NewJeans, and Daesang Group's kimchi brand 종가 partnered with the 17-member Hoshi.
I think after the success of BTS, K-pop fans started to want to know more about their artists' cultural backgrounds, like what they buy or eat, not just their songs. Brands are capitalizing on this curiosity, selecting K-pop artists to represent their products globally, so that they can connect with a broader audience.
As K-content continues to attract overseas consumers and the market expands, expect to see more Korean language and artists taking the spotlight. 송유진, Arirang News.
Cold winds are blowing even in the middle of the day, which makes the cold snap even colder. And as winds were strong, temperatures fell closer to 2 degrees. During the weekend, morning temperatures in Seoul will drop to -3 degrees, a tad colder than today. Please dress warmly when you go out. In the mountainous areas of Gangwon province, where a cold wave advisory has been issued, the sky will be clear tomorrow, but the weather will get colder than today. Since a lot of snow has piled up, extra caution is necessary on slippery roads. Morning temperatures will be below zero nationwide. Seoul, Chuncheon and Daejeon -3, Gwangju and Daegu -2 degrees. Highs in Seoul will get up to 7 degrees, about 8 to 9 in most places. This cold snap will last until Sunday morning and the weather will be mild next week. However, at the beginning of the week, there is rain or snow forecasts all over the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with the AI headline news. Hope everyone has a great weekend and a good night.